episode today. To start with, this man right here is Mr. George Soros, the 91-year-old financier who set up the Open Society Foundation and endowed it with billions of dollars, which eventually flowed into many left-wing causes around the entire world. However, despite the fact that Mr. George Soros' money is behind many of the groups that we see today in the news, there is, you can say, a fascinating phenomenon that occurs when you actually say that fact out loud. The weird trend in today's public discourse is such that when you just mention the name George Soros, you are automatically either placed into the realm of a conspiracy theorist or you're labeled as being anti-Semitic, which in my view is incredibly weird because I remember coming to work one day back in October of 2017, and on the table right there was that day's issue of the Wall Street Journal. So I picked it up, and right there on the front page, above the fold, it said that George Soros had transferred the bulk of his wealth into the Open Society foundations. He transferred $18 billion into his foundation. And after reading that, I thought to myself, wow, there will be a lot of news coverage regarding this. This is going to be a big deal, and finally people will talk about it. And yet, not really. Not too many people talked about it after that issue went away. Think about that, though. George Soros made perhaps one of the biggest transfers to a foundation in all of American history, and yet, besides that article in the Wall Street Journal, I did not see many people talking about it. Furthermore, it soon became obvious to me that people were not even allowed to talk about it, because very soon after that $18 billion transfer to his foundation, across the entire country, district attorneys that were backed by George Soros were getting elected left and right. In fact, according to a recent report, George Soros-backed prosecutors run half of America's largest jurisdictions. But as this wave of Soros-backed DAs were coming to power, well, there was an incredibly awkward interview with Newt Gingrich over on Fox News. And the moment that Newt Gingrich, who of course is the former Speaker of the House, the moment he dared to mention that George Soros' money had put a bunch of district attorneys into office, well, the host of that program, well, just watch for yourself.
Yeah, look, the number one problem in almost all these cities is George Soros elected left-wing, anti-police, pro-criminal district attorneys who refuse to keep people locked up. Just yesterday, they put somebody back on the street who's wanted for 2 different murders in New York City. You cannot solve this problem, and both Harris and Biden have talked very proudly about what they call progressive district attorneys. Progressive district attorneys are anti-police, pro-criminal, and overwhelmingly elected with George Soros' money, and they're a major cause of the violence we're seeing because they keep putting the violent criminals back on the street.
I'm not sure we need to bring George Soros into this.
I was going to say you get the last word, Speaker.
He paid for it. I mean, why can't we discuss the fact that millions of dollars he spent?
I agree with Melissa. George Soros doesn't need to be a part of this conversation.
Okay. So it's verboten.
All right, we're going to.
And right there, as soon as I saw that clip, I knew that this interview had revealed a small truth about our political and social landscape. What happened there on Fox News gave a tiny, tiny insight into who truly holds power in our society. And in fact, it reminded me of this famous quote from Mr. Voltaire. If you want to know who controls you, look at who you're not allowed to criticize. And right there, in that interview, as plain as day, was the person that you were not allowed to criticize. One of the wealthiest people in the world, who quite literally donated billions of dollars to his left-wing foundation, which was then funding the campaigns of radical prosecutors across the entire nation, and you were not even allowed to say his name. If you said his name, well, you saw what would happen. And so, in order to get an idea of, for one, why exactly George Soros is focusing on district attorneys, as well as how it exactly came to be that the media in this country covers up almost all of his involvement in politics, I took the opportunity to speak with Mr. Matt Palumbo, an investigative journalist, as well as the author of the book, The Man Behind the Curtain, Inside the Secret Network of George